Hello everyone, I'm K Swope, and I just hit a milestone here on YouTube. 200 subscribers, so I'm very, very excited and happy about that. Thank you all very, very much for subscribing. I appreciate that. This, by the way, is my 200 subscriber special, and I figured, you know what, let's do something special for this. Now, I had some people come in. I wanted some feedback. I put a video out a little while ago asking for people's feedback. What should I do on the channel? Kind of give them a roadmap of what I'd like to do as we go further along once I get monetized eventually, that kind of thing. I got some good feedback, and so I figured, you know what, I'm going to do this special based on the feedback that I got. So, as you can tell by the title of this video, I'm going to be going over my top 10 favorite comic book movies of all time. Now, I will say I do keep a list on Letterboxd, okay? It's got all of them. I've ranked all of them. There are 109 movies on this list. Now, keep in mind a few things to point out. First of all, these are all live action movies, okay? So I don't have any Spider-Verses, none of the DC animated stuff. None of that's going to be showing up on this list, let alone probably not in my top 10. Also, not going to be in my top 10, just for clarification. This also includes movies that are based on comic books and comic strips. So, for example, I do have like the Dennis the Menace movie in this because technically that's a comic. I know it's not what you think of as not superhero per se, but it's still included in this list. Again, none of it will be in the top 10, but it will still be here nonetheless. So I'm going to go through my top 10, talk about them, tell you what I like about them, that kind of thing. Not doing a full review, though. I'd like to do some of these movies in full reviews later. But let's go ahead and start things off. Number 10, we have Deadpool, ladies and gentlemen. Now, Deadpool, I love the movie so much. I love Ryan Reynolds very, very much. I'm disappointed with the current lawsuit going on because he is very clearly the bad guy, and it breaks my heart. But then again, celebrities, that's just the way they are. What can you do? But Ryan Reynolds, hilarious. Love Deadpool. I love what he does with the character. He is, of course, very, very passionate about the character of Deadpool. And I just love being able to see him go loose in that movie, do a lot of great stuff. I love this movie so much that I wanted to show my sister it because there was a time where she wanted to get into the X-Men movies. And so I wanted to show her Deadpool because it's like one of my favorites. The only problem is she was but a wee child. Therefore, I decided, hey, you know what? Let's make a PG-13 version of Deadpool. So I took the movie, I put it into one of my video editors, and I edited the whole thing, cut out some things, added a few censor beeps here and there. Got a bit creative with some transitions, things like that. But yeah, otherwise, it was a really fun thing to do. I'm very proud of how that edit turned out. And I also got to watch the movie so many times over and over again, piece by piece, while doing it. So it's actually one of the movies that I can quote the most, honestly. But Deadpool, love it. That's why it's in its 10th spot. Now, what movies do I like more than Deadpool, you might ask? Well, if we go to our number 9 spot, we can see Spider-Man Homecoming. Now, Spider-Man Homecoming is a very interesting case because I think it is a near perfect film if you're trying to capture the teenage Spider-Man kind of thing going on. You could debate that maybe it would be a better teenage Spider-Man film if it didn't have as many ties to the Avengers and Tony Stark and all that. I'd understand that. But other than that, it's a great movie. One of the things I loved about it so much is this was our second time seeing Tom Holland as Spider-Man. And I remember seeing the movie in theaters. This would have been like, I want to say, opening weekend or something like that. I was there with my sister, and we watched it, and I was thinking to myself, like, dang. I was like 16 at the time, I believe, and I was like, dang, you know, if I were Spider-Man, I have these powers, I would be acting very similar with them, be doing a very similar thing to what Peter Parker did. Not to mention it was funny, but not like the MCU where they just try to put in the same type of MCU humor here and there. It was funny in a way that made sense and I think worked well for the characters. So overall, really good experience. Loved the movie. Very, very solid. It is one of my favorite Spider-Man movies. Maybe not my favorite Spider-Man movie. We'll get to that in just a minute. But still great. Awesome movie. So that gets 9th place in my top 10. My 8th place is the first Avengers film. Now, the first Avengers film, I don't know, some of you guys might be younger watching this, but if you were not conscious what was going on culturally in 2012 when this movie came out, I remember seeing the first advertisements for it and just being completely mind blown because back then these type of big superhero movie crossovers were completely like unheard of. Like we've had movie crossovers here and there before. The Avengers, though, and to be honest, I did not see any MCU films until I think of it. Avengers may have been my first MCU film, come to think of it. But the thing that was mind-blowing to me is that I knew all these movies were coming out, okay? It's like Captain America's coming out. Oh, cool. I want to see it. I was too young at that age to, go to the movies. My parents never wanted to take me to the movies because it would cost a lot of money. And in today's economy, I completely agree. I'd really just catch movies whenever I could. Whether I was at like a friend's house, we were watching something. We occasionally rented some stuff from Redbox, but I don't think I really saw any MCU movies at that point. So Avengers was the thing that got me hooked on the MCU. And I was just completely mind blown at the massive crossover. I thought it was like the coolest thing ever. And I still think it's really good because they executed everything, I think, in phase 1 of the MCU very, very well, building it to this big Avengers crossover event. And I just think the whole thing was really smooth. The first phase of the MCU, generally speaking, was very, very well done, with the exception of the Incredible Hulk. Not that that was a bad movie, just that they had a lot of issues with that one. And of course, they already had Hulk recast by the time we got to Avengers, which is kind of crazy on a second appearance. So, yeah, what a shame. Moving on to number 7, we have what is basically the Avengers of Spider-Man, being Spider-Man No Way Home. Now, know what you're thinking. There are better Spider-Man movies out there, and I agree. There are better Spider-Man movies out there. However, the reason I have this movie ranked so high is because it basically highlights all of my favorite aspects of Spider-Man in movies, period. We bring back some of the best villains we've seen Spider-Man fight. You know, we have Doc Ock, we got Green Goblin, both from the Sam Raimi movies, which was incredibly awesome. Obviously, we did get to see Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield as well, so seeing them involved also was fantastic. We got to see the Lizard and Electro from The Amazing Spider-Man. Those were two, they're probably the best villains, easily the best villains of that series. I also think it's really interesting because we got to see sort of a new take, a new spin on Spider-Man with Tom Holland's Spider-Man here in the MCU, because it didn't occur to me until I was like over halfway through the movie that, hold on a second, these three movies, these three trilogies are still technically Spider-Man's origin story, which is very fascinating, because if you didn't think about it, it's kind of like this. So really young Spider-Man pops up. He's in Civil War, okay? He was doing a little bit of street level stuff, but nothing that much. He didn't even have like a proper superhero suit at that point. Tony Stark drops in. He's like, hey kid, I need your help. I'll get you a fancy suit and blah, blah, blah. I know that's not how it went, but it's close enough. So he does that stuff, then goes back to doing the friendly neighborhood stuff, and he's trying to up his game, fight some more bad guys and things like that. But I think the thing that's most interesting is Uncle Ben's not mentioned. We just kind of assume the Uncle Ben stuff happened already, but really, if we're viewing these three movies, meaning Homecoming, Far From Home, and No Way Home, as an origin story trilogy, then we kind of sort of don't need Uncle Ben because, spoiler alert, obviously, if I haven't been spoiling all these movies, Aunt May dies. And when Aunt May dies, she gives Peter Parker the with great power comes great responsibility thing, which is crazy because he's kind of been learning that lesson throughout, except he's not been told that line explicitly until this very moment. And then, of course, when everything plays out, we got the final battle and everything. Very, very good. And then, hopefully, we get Peter Parker. By the end of the movie, his status quo goes back to street-level hero, and I'm very much looking forward to that, especially seeing some street-level Spider-Man stuff as a young adult Peter Parker, because that's where a majority of his comic arcs lie age-wise. So I'm excited to see them return to form. It seems like they're going to be doing, hopefully, we'll be seeing a lot more street-level, basic Spider-Man, very familiar, if you're familiar with the comics, type of action going on. So looking forward to that. And yeah, No Way Home, which is fantastic. Great highlight reel. Everything that I love about Spider-Man in film is on full display there. And so that's why I have that one so high. But one I have even higher, of course, is Avengers Endgame. Now, Avengers Endgame, I don't need to tell you why Endgame is great. It is the culmination. It is the grand finale of everything the MCU built up to that point. And everything is pretty good, not going to lie. There's a few things here and there I didn't like. Like, I think it was a little slow, especially like the first half of the movie. I think it really got exciting and picked up about halfway through when they were time traveling, doing stuff like that. Black Widow dying, unfortunately, which is sad. Tony Stark obviously dies, but that whole ending with Tony Stark, absolutely fantastic, because it is really bringing the character full circle. So first, obviously, when we meet him, he's super self-obsessed, blah, 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 has this traumatic event, becomes Iron Man, right? And he's still very cocky and egotistical the whole way through most of the MCU films. He does take on some new roles here and there that involve him maturing a little bit in different ways. By the time it picks up in Endgame, he is a husband, he is a father. He eventually makes the ultimate sacrifice to save half of the universe. And it is amazing because we see it, and really his arc kind of goes like this, from selfish and hot-headed to more humble and self-sacrificial. And it's great because we get to see that come full circle. Really good, really touching. Very sad, though, too. We also get to see Captain America kind of do the opposite, because he's known to be the altruistic one, except he's been doing that so long that he hasn't had a chance to really live for himself. And so him retiring and going back in time, staying with Peggy, it's confusing. And I don't think it's, great technically speaking, because that's going to create more issues than it solves. However, as far as ending the character's arc, I think it's a really good place to do that. And yeah, it's also, the biggest superhero crossover that we have seen up to this point until, of course, Avengers Doomsday comes out. And then, of course, Secret Wars. We have had some more great big crossovers as well, but none of them have matched the magnitude yet of Avengers Endgame. So we'll get there, but until then, Endgame, great movie, great finale. I think it was fantastic. Shifting gears here quite a bit. We're moving into some DC for my number 5 pick, which is Joker, okay? Joker, I went into the movie not really expecting much. I came out of the movie and I was like, that was so good. It was so good. And I still love Joker to this day. Which, speaking of which, after seeing Joker Folie à Deux, if you have not seen my review yet, I am very, very mad in said review. I'm very frustrated because I loved the first one oh so much, and seeing how terribly they just botched it so horribly in the second movie just really makes my blood boil, because the first one was so great. This movie says a lot about society, and I think it's really good because it says a lot, but it comes to a conclusion where you can make up your own opinion, which I also really, really appreciate and really, really enjoy. Because on one hand, you have Arthur Fleck, where corporate greed and selfishness in the media are villainizing him, even though he's made some mistakes. He has done some bad stuff straight up. But it's an interesting dynamic because he is a bad guy, but on the other hand, society also kind of made him become a bad guy, so maybe he wouldn't have become as bad a guy if it weren't for society. But I don't know. I mean, it's kind of up for you to, take all the pieces of information in, come up with what you think, and I think the movie is fantastic because we're showing this origin story where you have a guy who's a, mentally ill outsider loner who can't get the help that he needs, does not have the support system that he needs, and is not surrounded by people who can help him. And as a result, he goes crazy. Bad stuff happens to him, and we kind of see how that fallout takes place. Now, one thing about this movie I like is they don't try to justify anything that Joker does, or Arthur Fleck as he's known in this. They don't try to justify any of it. He is a bad guy, but you can empathize with how he got to becoming said bad guy. So I think that's interesting. Leaves you with some really interesting food for thought. So again, Joker, fantastic. I greatly appreciated it. I think the performance too, Joaquin Phoenix, everyone involved, was fantastic. Really, really good movie. And the music in it too, like Frank Sinatra, That's Life. I cannot hear that song and not think of Joker because, yeah, so iconic, so good. But I love Joker so much. Moving into 4th place. Ladies and gentlemen, this one might be a bit controversial, but Zack Snyder's Justice League. So let me tell you a personal story, okay? I was so hyped for this movie. When they announced the Snyder Cut of Justice League, let me back up actually. When Justice League came out, I did not get a chance to see it in theaters, unfortunately. But everyone told me it just wasn't very good. When I finally got around to watching it, I was like, yeah, that was not very good. Very disappointing. I could, however, see the dichotomy between there could have been something good there, but there wasn't. I, of course, blame Joss Whedon for that. He did not do very good with the thing at all. Obviously, in case you don't know this, Zack Snyder had a personal tragedy in his life, which caused him to step away from the film, and Joss Whedon finished it, and Joss Whedon also did not do the movie any favor. So obviously, fans campaigning, all this stuff, released the Snyder Cut. I'm sure you heard about all that already. Anyways, finally comes out 2021, so we're in the heat of a pandemic, as I'm sure you probably remember. How could you forget? And I was working, okay? I was working the day it came out. It was a Thursday. And this is very important because Thursdays at this point in my life were chaotic because I was taking online college classes. So I woke up in the morning, did some college work, okay? And then at noon, I actually had a volunteer radio show at one point that ran for about 3 hours. So I went to do my show, okay, at noon for 3 hours. Movie was out, by the way, already. But I had school to do. Then I did my radio show. And then after my radio show, I have an hour to go home, get changed, eat something, and then I was working part-time at a grocery store stocking shelves, okay? So I basically did that. The shelf stocking thing, it took me to like 9 or 10. I forget what time exactly. So I do that, all that work. I come home, I take a shower, and then, you know what, it's showtime. And so that night, I didn't start the movie till like close to probably like 11 o'clock. And I watch it straight through, me and my brother, into the AMs, and we were just like, that was good. That was very good. And so I absolutely love Zack Snyder's Justice League. It is great because you can finally see what Zack Snyder was trying to go for, what he was building to with both Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman. Technically, with the way films work, I'm not supposed to say this, but this is what I think. I think retroactively it makes Batman vs. Superman and Man of Steel better movies because we can see them as kind of like a trilogy. And to be honest, I could totally see what Zack Snyder was aiming for, maybe potentially, was making this more of a Lord of the Rings type of thing, where you had 3 long epic fantasy movies that cultivated in Justice League. That's kind of what I think he was going for, and I think the studios prevented that from happening by interfering a lot with Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman. So when we can see it all come to fruition with his version of Justice League, 4 hours, everything, I think it just turned out to be really, really good. It was very, very stylized and artistic, but not in like a cheapy, corny kind of way. It was an epic. It was an epic of the mightiest proportions, and he really treated the DC characters like a modern mythology. I had a friend who put it like that to me once, and I thought, couldn't have said it better myself, and I think that movie was absolutely fantastic. I've only watched it through once because it's so gosh dang long, but great movie. Love it to death. There's one movie that has had more of an impact on my life than that one, and that's my number 3 pick, which is none other than Guardians of the Galaxy, and that's the first one we're talking about. So Guardians of the Galaxy, let me tell you why that movie had such an impact on my life. So the year was 2014. I've always been a big fan of music, okay? And I like listening to the radio, I like listening to what's going on, new stuff. And in 2014, I noticed that the music, modern, pop radio, stuff like that, was just getting worse. And I wasn't really finding much music that I liked anymore. And lo and behold, Guardians of the Galaxy drops. I see the movie. First of all, I love the movie. It is absolutely fantastic. But something that made more impact on my life than the movie was the soundtrack, okay? The Awesome Mix, Volume 1. So that soundtrack was incredible because at a time in my life where I needed a change with music, that movie was there and the soundtrack was incredible and it hooked me in. And from that point, my music taste took a very different direction. So that was great. But enough talking about the soundtrack alone. The soundtrack, of course, was amazing. But the movie was also really, really great. James Gunn is really, really good at doing movies with misfit characters, obscure characters, putting a little bit of his own twist on them, and making really good content out of that. Because he also did The Suicide Squad, another great movie. He did that one. He did the 3 Guardians of the Galaxy movies. Even in Scooby-Doo, which I have not seen in their entirety, to be quite honest. But the live-action Scooby-Doo movies, taking like a motley crew of some people are idiots, but stuff like that. I really, really think he is so, so good at that. I'm really, really excited to see what he's going to do with DC. So I'm actually watching Creature Commandos right now. I'm going to put a review out for that later. But in the meantime, really good. I really like what he's doing with DC so far. I love what he did with Marvel so far. And this movie was the start of all of it. It was absolutely fantastic. The stylization was great. I really like stylized movies, and this movie just had this special feel. And it's so good too because you don't need to have any prior knowledge of anything in the MCU to watch this movie and enjoy it. And I think that really says a lot because it almost feels like a modern Star Wars. It feels like a space epic that stands on its own very, very well. And I think that might be what I like about it most because you don't really need to do any homework to watch the movie. You can just watch it, show it to anybody, never seen a single Marvel project, and there's nothing that needs to be explained to them. It's all going to make sense. And there's not a bunch of crossovers and cameos, which is something that is kind of overdone nowadays. And so I really like that aspect of the movie as well. But there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That is my number 3 pick. My number 2 pick, okay? This should come as no surprise to most people, but it is, of course, The Dark Knight. Now, The Dark Knight, I'm going to say this. Now, this is where my opinion and facts kind of split off. Okay, it's going to be my number 1 and 2 picks. Because, in my opinion, this is the second best superhero movie ever made. It is the best as a movie, though, ever made, I will say. So, the best movie, the best superhero movie, objectively, I would say is this one. Not my number 1 pick, not my favorite, but I would objectively say that The Dark Knight is the best superhero movie ever made. The reason why, we have stakes in the movie that are very, very real. We, of course, have the Batman and Joker dynamic displayed in the best stakes possible. And they really get at the essence of Joker and Batman, where Joker is the fly in Batman's ointment. They're almost like polar opposites. We have Batman, who's dark and stoic and heroic. Then we have Joker, who's bright and flashy and chaotic and wants to do anything possible to get under Batman's skin to put him in the worst pressure and situations humanly possible. And we get that out of this movie. Not only do we get that, but the movie's also incredibly well done. We have all kinds of great scenarios going on. I can't get into all of it right now because I'll just start geeking out and reciting the movie like front to back, telling you everything that happens. And I don't want to do that right now. But yeah, it's so well done, so well written. Christopher Nolan, okay, he has an amazing track record with not just superhero movies, but movies in general. If you go back and watch all of his movies, they're all great ones. They're all hits. There's no misses in any of Christopher Nolan's work that he's done. Very, very good. And not to mention, something that movies should do that this movie does really, really well is they're about something. They have a message. They're trying to convey something to the audience, say something about the world, say something about society. And in this movie, the message is very much the idea, I guess, more than the message. The idea is you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain, right? Well, we get to see that played out as we see people like Batman and Harvey Dent and then the Joker, right? The Joker is basically the antagonist to kind of set that idea in motion, right? Because as we can see in the movie, Harvey Dent falls, okay? He goes through the one bad day arc, kind of, sort of, in a way, and becomes Two-Face, okay? Joker did that to him. He lived long enough to become the villain, even though he was, even by Batman's own admission, a better hero than he was, okay? He was the White Knight of Gotham. So Batman decides, hey, in order to preserve Harvey Dent's legacy, tell everyone that I did it, okay? So in reality, what happens is Batman gets blamed for everything. However, he died an actual hero because he retires Batman until, of course, The Dark Knight Rises, being the ultimate climax to the trilogy. But he takes the blame for it all. So in reality, he dies a hero, but he makes it look like he lived long enough to become the villain in order to let Harvey Dent look like he died a hero, which is very, very fascinating. So they take the idea, they bring it to its conclusion, but then they also flip it at the very end, and it's a very, very fascinating thought train. And I think every good movie should do that. Every good movie should make you think, should make you process stuff, everything like that. And that's just one of the things that makes it a fantastic movie. But that's all I'm going to say about The Dark Knight for now. My number one movie, again, I'm not saying this is the best movie ever made by any means. Best comic book movie, I'm not saying that per se. But this is my favorite movie, not just comic book, of all time, okay, ladies and gentlemen, is none other than Batman. That is, of course, the 1989 Batman, for those who need the clarification. It is, in my opinion, the greatest movie ever made. I love this movie so much. I cannot think of another movie that I have watched as many times as this movie. I am low-key obsessed with any of the Tim Burton Batman movies. Any of them. There's two of them. What am I saying? I'm obsessed with both of them, okay? Michael Keaton's Batman, loved it. Yeah, fantastic. I don't even know where to begin. Let's start with this. So I think this movie represents, just generally as a whole, the characters of Batman and Joker the best. Now, here's what I mean by that, just to clarify. What I mean is we have Batman, okay? He's, this dark, stoic hero. And then we have Joker, who's, kind of similar to what I said in The Dark Knight, right? Now, during this time in history, we were in the Bronze Age of comics. And I think everything up to that point was perfectly encapsulated in that version of Batman and that version of Joker. I believe that they were the best, most well-rounded versions, and still kind of are. They represent the characters the best way that I think we've seen them so far. And I think you could probably debate that that's at the cost of some of the writing of the film, because like I said, we have Christopher Nolan's, which is objectively a better movie. However, because I love these characters so much, I love seeing them being actualized in a more accurate way than I do seeing Christopher Nolan do his thing, even though it is fantastic. So I love the movie. Not to mention, personally, let me tell you the true story about how I came across it. The year was also 2014 or 2015. I forget the actual time, but I can tell you this much. Growing up, my parents would organize our community yard sale, okay, on our block, and our neighbors had a bunch of movies that they were selling, and I was going through them, okay. This is when I was first starting to boom, get into my big superhero craze that I'm still into. and they had the movie Batman, okay, my neighbors, for like $1, okay, on DVD. And I was like, hey, I'll buy that. So I bought it. I watched it that night. And after I watch it, I'm like, this is like nothing I've ever seen before. And then I can't help but to keep going back to it and rewatching it. And this was also, too, right during the hype. The Dark Knight just came out like 2 years ago. Now, me and my friends were just kind of starting to get into that. But I was getting really big into Batman at that point. And so I loved it. I watched the Christopher Nolan movies multiple times. I watched this movie multiple times. But this is the one I just kept coming back to because I just kept feeling in my bones that I'm like, this feels like the most accurate way that I've ever seen this character in live action, that is. And so I really, really resonate and really, really love that. Not to mention the performances from Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson are absolutely iconic, which is absolutely great as well. Now, Jack Nicholson, of course, not as iconic as Heath Ledger. We all know that, but still iconic nonetheless. I think this movie as well, the Batmobile, is the definitive Batmobile look. So if you think of Batmobile, you ask any just average Joe to think of the Batmobile, describe it to you, they're going to start describing you this movie's version of the Batmobile straight up. So there's that, which is fantastic. We also, in this movie, see for the first time Batman speaking with a different voice when he's Batman versus when he's Bruce Wayne. Now, Michael Keaton was a lot more subtle about it than Christopher Nolan going all like, "Where's Rachel?" He was, not doing that, of course, but he started doing that, and that even influenced Kevin Conroy when he did his Batman voice versus his Bruce Wayne voice. So it really all started with Michael Keaton. Not to mention his suit design in the movie. Beautiful, absolutely amazing. If you watch my Batman suit review, you can see how high I rank that up there, but let's just say it's pretty high. Jack Nicholson's look, also very, very good. Very, very Joker. You look at both those characters, you're like, that is Batman, that is Joker. Also, this movie has the most iconic Batman score of all time from Danny Elfman, which is just amazing. It is so good. So good, in fact, that the Batman animated series just had to make its own version of it for the theme intro. And the 3 Lego Batman games also used that as part of its soundtrack as well, because like I said, so iconic, so good. And speaking of the Lego games, they took so much information from the Tim Burton and Joel Schumacher Batman movies in the first Lego Batman, a video game fun fact for you, which is another great part of my childhood, which might also be why I love the movie so much, because so many pieces of it just resonate with me with what happened there. But that is it, ladies and gentlemen. That is my top 10 superhero comic book movies. Thank you guys all for watching. Again, this is my 200 subscriber special, so thank you guys all for subscribing. For 300 subscribers, I might actually do my 10 worst, because let me tell you, I have a list. I tell you that much, and it is it's a doozy, we'll tell you. But until then, I'm K-Swope. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.